Good morning, everybody. I don't know how I started a little bit early just because I wanted to do just a couple of quick housekeeping things, and I thought that this way maybe you would have time to do that. So, welcome to the sleep presentation. We're going to start that momentarily. I'll wait until 9 o'clock to get going. But as you can see in the message or in the chat, what I've done is if you go to the very top where, like in the briefings, we had the chat polls handouts across the top. In handouts, I've actually uploaded a handout for people if they are interested. It looks the same for all three of the briefings. It's called Transformational Learning, Observe, Reflect, Interact, Decide. And there's just a couple of boxes that you can fill out that are kind of some things that we've used in previous classes that are just like a fact, something that you learned that you didn't know, a question that you have that you might be interested in learning about, an aha moment, a thing about self-care that you're going to try to maybe implement for yourself so that you're actually walking away from this, taking some concrete steps to, you know, apply some of the things that you've been or that you've learned, and then finally an action thing in terms of maybe some way that you can share this information or you know, with a friend, with a coworker who wasn't able to make it, with your family, or just something that you're going to do. So that's what this is. It's there for, as I say, all three of the briefings. If you wanted to and have access, I don't know where everybody is participating from in terms of if they're on a laptop or on a phone, in which case printing might be a little bit more of a challenge, but it's there. Otherwise, obviously, just take notes as you feel necessary to do so. I'm a total nerdy note taker, so that's just my way of doing things. But yeah, so by my count, we've got 29 people, which is more than I saw that were registered when I went in to double check to make sure that everything in the room was set up. So that's exciting for me. And it's 8:59. I just want to maybe, can I get like a thumbs up or something from anybody out there just to let me know that you're actually hearing and seeing me okay? Okay, excellent. Thank you. You know what? I love this because you do it and then one person thinks, yeah, I'm on the ball. And then like everybody does the thumbs up or whatever, which is awesome to see. So thank you so much. That's wonderful. Okay. It is still 8:59. I'm gonna put up my slides. And Heather and Nicole and I had talked a lot about sort of the benefits of having the talking head above the slides. And we've sat through webinars where there wasn't a person, but we also know that a lot of people would rather just sort of see the slides. So for the briefings, as you know, we made ourselves disappear. And I feel like that might be the way to go again today, just because I think sometimes it maybe, I don't know, like what is your guys' preference? Do you care? Would you rather just see the slide? Because it's going to be me and my crazy hand gestures, which is sometimes a little bit distracting. Um, so I'm happy to disappear. Plus, then you can't tell that I'm necessarily still relying on my notes more than I should, but you know, don't tell anybody. Okay, I have 9 o'clock, so we're going to get going. And maybe just for sake of making sure that everybody can see again, because if you're using your phone or something that's smaller, it might just be easier to see. So I'm going to just part for now, and I will come back at the end to do the wrap up. So I'll hide with what is it, the melodious sounds of my voice. Hopefully it doesn't lull you to sleep. So welcome to the Health Promotion Sleep webinar. Sleep is one of those things that you either think about or you don't. If you've never struggled with sleep, then you are one of the lucky ones. If insomnia, inadequate sleep, broken or disrupted sleep, either from chronic pain or age, which does impact sleeping, or any other number of reasons, is something that you deal with on a daily basis, then hopefully in the next little while, you are going to get some ideas that can further help you to explore, or things that you might be able to implement to see if you can improve that a little bit. If there are things that might be causing your sleep to be affected that are underlying, then maybe that's something that you want to discuss with your medical provider if you haven't already done so. So things like sleep apnea, snoring, TMD, which is temporomandibular joint disorder, which is related to bruxism or the jaw or teeth grinding that a lot of people end up getting mouth guards for. If those are all things that you struggle with and haven't yet addressed, it might be a good idea to deal with those. Oh, that's weird. Okay, I have a disclaimer, but I'm just gonna read it out. You can't see it. You can just read the overview. So the presentation that you're about to review is the intellectual property of the Department of National Defense, Strengthening the Forces Health Promotion Program. Any reproduction transmission of the slides contained in the presentation is strictly forbidden. And since you guys are all about secrets and all that kind of stuff, I don't think that this is going to be an issue. That was so funny last time. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about today, it's a quick and dirty look basically at what we're doing in terms of sleep. What do we need to do better with respect to sleep and how we can get it? Why we need to have sleep and what happens when we don't, what we can concretely do to help us to get both a better quality and quantity of sleep, because we need both. And assuming that you've addressed any of those underlying issues, hopefully some of the things that we talk about are going to be things that you can implement relatively easily. And if you haven't already, there's that sheet. And I am going to talk a little bit about naps at the end, as well as sleep banking, because that's some stuff that's coming out or has come out a little bit more recently. And it's an interesting concept, especially in the context of a military environment where, you know, your schedules are often very disrupted by the taskings or the things that you do or just your day-to-day work. I'm not sure how many of you are shift workers, but that's clearly something that is going to impact people's quality sleep and have some significant long-term effects. And that's what the research is definitely showing. So we're going to talk a little bit about those kinds of things in the context of sleep as well. So sleep is one of the pillars of health. It is considered to be part of the performance triad along with healthy eating and physical activity. It's part of the mission ready and balanced strategies. And so we know that the military has identified it as something that we need to focus on and try to prioritize. And there's some irony there, because I know from things that I've heard from people, like when they're on even going back to basic training, like there's not a lot of time for sleep. It's kind of go, go, go. And now that things have been crammed together, it's shorter period of time to learn all the same information. Sleep is kind of given short shrift, which is really unfortunate, because it's in that time of learning that sleep is particularly important. Because without adequate, consistent quality sleep, health and eventually quality of life begins to suffer. And obviously, as you probably are aware, insufficient sleep can be a safety risk and a threat to mission success. So clearly a really important thing to consider. And it impacts everyday life. It promotes our physical health, our longevity, and our emotional well-being. It's managed by our bodies exactly the same way that the need for eating, drinking, and breathing are regulated. So it's ingrained. If we don't get it enough at some point for a long enough period of time, we are going to suffer. We may not die as we would if we didn't drink adequately or have access to food, but it is going to significantly impact our health. Because sleep is the only time that our brain can recover from the daily wear and tear that we put it through every single day. Even if you're resting, and we have done a couple of briefings in the past where we've talked about what your brain does when you're just sort of zoned out, and we call that buffering. Like just like when your computer has to buffer to download some, the podcast or whatever that you're listening to, or something that you're streaming, that buffering that happens is the exact same thing that goes on in your brain when you're just having one of those moments. You're just sort of zoned out, and it's just an opportunity for a little bit of a reset. But it's not the same thing as actually sleeping. The only time that recovery can fully happen is when you are asleep. So especially during episodes of training or when you're learning a new skill, it's really important to try to prioritize sleep so that new information can be laid down and added to the long-term memory so that it's going to be easily and readily accessible and retrievable when you need it. And so there again, that underlying irony of how training often happens. I think that the mistaken philosophy is that if we can train it to you, if we can drill it into you under stress, then it's more likely to stick, and it's actually the exact opposite. So you want to make it almost feel like a vacation where you're learning things, and then you put it into practice, and then you start adding those sleep deprivation kinds of pieces in there once all that new training and learning has been laid down. So just something to, some food for thought there. The average amount of sleep that we need over the 100 centuries, or well, however many centuries we've been around, too many, hasn't changed. We've essentially still require the same amount of sleep as when we did when we were living in caves. But the ability of people to get that sleep has been negatively impacted with the dawn of the ever more electronic, always connected age that we find ourselves living in. And while genetics is a big factor in determining both the amount of sleep that you need, as well as whether you're an early riser or a night owl, there's nothing that says, well, my mom and dad, they got through on the farm 4 hours of sleep and they were fine, lived till 90 years old. Maybe that's true, but there were probably some other things that were going on that might not have been as good as it could have been had they been getting the sleep that they needed. Same with shift workers, right, as I've already mentioned. And we know that shift work on average takes about 4 hours of your potential lifespan away. So kind of a scary thing to think about. Both, as I mentioned, quantity and quality of sleep are important because your brain needs to restore and repair. It needs to grow new connections to work efficiently, form those memories, and process all of the new information that we're exposed to on a daily basis. So how much sleep do we actually need? Just for funsies, before I put it up on the next slide, just in the chat, how many hours of sleep do you think people need? Not get, but need. And you can put it as a range. Okay, 6, 8 to 10, 8, 8, 7 to 9. Okay, yep. All right. So those of you who are leaning to the 6 side, that might be that little bias that we have where, because that might be what we're getting, that says what we need. There isn't actually an age that we require less than 7 hours of sleep, right on up until we're retired and living the good life. So most everybody, other than exactly, right? And that's kind of where we're at with sleep right now. So the studies that we've done and that we have, and it's ongoing, and sleep research is fascinating, but those studies show that people who get the appropriate amounts of sleep on a regular basis tend to live longer, healthier lives than those who sleep either too few hours or too many hours each night. So there is that sweet spot that we need to try to find. And it's just as important, therefore, that we try to prioritize it just like we do eating well, which Nicole is going to talk about at whatever time it is that next briefing is. I'm not doing it, so I'm not paying attention, 11, I think. And making sure that you get enough daily physical activity, which I'll be talking to you guys about this afternoon. If the sleep cycle is shortened to less than 7 to 9 hours per night, the body and mind cannot restore themselves adequately, and daytime sleepiness and eventually longer-term negative side effects can result. And it sounds a little bit doom and gloom, and every time I reread and read through my notes to kind of prepare for this, I was like, I wonder if this is going to sound too depressing, but I think we really need to remember and realize how important sleep is to us. So as a test, and I don't know that anybody right now, like we had kind of an opportunity when everything was shut down, but the only way that you'll truly know how much sleep you need is to find out when you have a long period of time, like during a vacation or extended time off work, to do the following. So every night you go to bed at a reasonable time, 10, 30, 11, as long as it's consistent. Then you sleep until you feel rested and restored. And then you just get up. And you repeat that until such time as you can get up at a time that you want to get up without an alarm. So once you know what that magic number is, the idea is that you plan your routine so that you can allow for that bedtime and wake up time to permit you that 7 to 9 hours. And we're going to take a look at maybe what some of those things are to be able to create the best scenario for that to happen. And the reality is that, as much as maybe we would like to get 9, the reality is if we're getting 5 and 6 right now, maybe 7 is our kind of go-to, and that's already the holy grail. So if we can get there, we're already making some good progress. So just, to put it in a little bit of context and make it a little bit hopefully more manageable and doable. So sleep happens in stages, and they're all important. And the research is sort of divided as to whether there's 5 or 4 stages. Some of them put stages 3 and 4 together. It really doesn't matter. But what should happen every night is in stage 1, which is 5 to 10 minutes about, it's where you start and where you finish, ideally. It's light sleep or transitional sleep. It's what happens when you're in your car and you're not driving, obviously, and you're drifting off. You can kind of still hear the radio maybe in the background or the people that are talking in the vehicle with you, but you can get up. If someone jabs you in the shoulder because you need to help with directions, you're easily woken up. And that is the last stage of sleep, that if you woke yourself or allowed yourself to wake up without an alarm, that's the stage of sleep that you would wake up from. which is why when your alarm goes off and you're not in stage 1, it feels like you're trying to drag yourself out of like a big dish of pudding. So then you move into stage 2 sleep, which is 15 to 25 minutes around there, and that's considered to be true sleep. And while it's not the deep, slow wave sleep that a lot of people think is the most important, there's a lot of really important things that happen here, and I'm going to talk about that on the next slide. But this is considered light sleep. So you're not aware of your surroundings anymore, your brain activity is starting to slow down, your body temperature drops, and breathing and heart rate are regular. Then after that 15 or 25 minutes, you move into that stage 3 or 4, whichever research you read, whatever that is. And that's going to be anywhere between 5 and 40 minutes, depending on the time of night and the number of the sleep cycle that you're in. So over the course of the night, you're going to cycle through all of these stages more than once, hopefully. So if you're sleeping 7 hours, you're going to get through these stages, 5, 6, 7 times, depending on how efficiently you fall asleep and how many disruptions there are and all of those kinds of things. So the deep sleep is characterized by the deep, slow wave sleep where breathing slows and muscles relax. It's the kind of sleep that when you go in, when you had small children and you watched them sleeping, that's what you were watching. That, rhythmic breathing, their little tummies rising and falling, their eyelids aren't fluttering because they're just deeply, deeply asleep. It's kind of a totally magical thing to watch, actually. In that period, there's no sporadic burst of brain activity, but interestingly, this is where sleep terrors and sleepwalking would occur if they were to happen. It's quite difficult to wake someone up from this stage of sleep, and this stage gets shorter as the sleep cycles progress over the course of the night. There are dreams here, but they're different than the REM sleep dreams that typically occur later on, which is in stage 5, which is your REM sleep. The first cycle of that happens around 70 to 90 minutes after first falling asleep, and the first go round of your sleep cycle is about 10 minutes long. And as the night progresses, oh, true, any sleeping child is magical, absolutely. As sleep progresses, that REM sleep cycle gets longer and longer, lasting eventually up to about an hour by the end of the night. And this is where the dreams that we remember occur. It's characterized by that rapid eye movement, even though your eyes are closed, breathing is rapid, irregular, and shallow. Your heart rate and blood pressure are actually increased, and your arms and legs experience a type of paralysis to keep us from being able to act upon what we were dreaming, which is a good thing. Substance use has a profound effect on REM sleep. So any of the things like that we talked about during the alcohol and drug briefing, those are all going to affect the REM sleep. So that's going to be your caffeine, alcohol, cannabis, opioid pain meds, benzodiazepines, some antidepressant medication, and lithium will all suppress REM sleep. So when you're dealing with an underlying condition, say you have, chronic depression, you want to try to find one that obviously that's not going to be the side effect for, but we also know that even for people who live with depression and are very successful and manage their symptoms and everything really, really well, the impact on REM sleep is such that they're still able to function. So there's so many things that we don't know yet, and I'm going to get into that when we talk about the mystery box that is REM sleep. So while ideally we would want to spend all of those times that I just outlined in each of those phases and stages of sleep, we still don't know exactly why or what off will happen and what happens if we don't, because there's just so much that we don't know, because you can't really measure those things. You can just look at the brain waves and all the monitors and things that you can put people on when they're doing sleep research, but there's so many things that we still don't understand in terms of the relative importance of each. But we do know a couple of things. We know that in stage 2, there's lots of action, including significant changes to the brain activity. One of the most important elements of stage 2 sleep is the emergence of what are called sleep spindles. These are bursts of electrical activity in the brain that are believed to play an important role in maintaining the brain's communication system, which is critical, especially when we think about as we're getting older and trying to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's and those kinds of things. In addition, it also allows or it has functions in relation to learning and memory. So those things that we were talking about as training goes. In stage 2, a lot of those things are going to be happening. So what the research shows is that the sleep spindles have been associated with synaptic plasticity, meaning how well your brain is going to be able to make the different connections, memory consolidation, so making sure that it goes from what you just learned and gets transferred into the right part of your brain for long-term memory and retrieval, and improvements in declarative memory formation, which I didn't actually look up, so there's something that you might want to put down in terms of a question that you might still have. So that sleep spindle density has even been associated with IQ. And my daughter talks about IQ all the time. And um, anyway, I need to tell, she's also a horrible sleeper, always has been. That magical sleeping child, yeah, that wasn't my kid. Anyway, in stage 3, which is that deep, slow wave sleep, that's when tissue healing and repair is believed to occur, and when the hormones that assist with growth development are thought to be released. And this is for all of us who are, getting to that stage of life where we're wanting to maintain kind of the body that we have. This is a really important reason to try to get the sleep, because this stage 3 sleep is where you burn fat and build muscle. So all the work that you do at the gym, if you're not sleeping properly, you might be literally shooting yourself in the foot. So the REM sleep dreams that happen are believed to allow the brain to process information, and also stimulates the regions of the brain that are used in learning and storing memories. So if the amount of REM sleep is below optimal, it may become more difficult to learn and remember new skills and tasks, and learning may become more difficult, which is why sleep for kids is so important, and why we need to make sure that we're not shortchanging them. If sleep is affected by irregular sleep patterns or pulling an all-nighter or shift work, the sleep cycles are disrupted, and there may be longer, deeper periods of slow wave sleep, but less REM sleep. But that's not necessarily a tragedy, because we can sort of sort that out. But what happens is not only the proportion of time spent in each type of sleep being important, we want to make sure that the specific sequences of non-REM and REM sleep are able to be maintained, which is why that consistency of sleep is important. When that gets messed up for whatever reason, physical and mental rejuvenation isn't as optimal as it should be, so we're neither as well rested or as healthy as we could have been had we got the right amount of sleep consistently. The good news is that if REM sleep is disrupted, the sleep cycle the next night isn't going to follow the normal progression, and will end up trying to get more REM sleep on those subsequent nights until you've caught up. The downside is there's only so many hours that you're asleep. So if in that period of time that you're sleeping, there's now more REM sleep, that means you're getting less of the other sleep, so you're losing out on the benefits of what those stages of sleep are getting you. So this is why it's really critical to try to get that right amount and quality of sleep every night. So in terms of those mysteries of REM sleep, and there was a really, really interesting Nova show, like the program Nova, that was on sleep. And what they discovered is that, yeah, we know that there's these vital processes achieved by REM sleep, but we don't know why there's no discernible effect when deprivation occurs continuously for decades with, for example, chronic antidepressant use. They found that even subjects with permanent damage to the REM generating part of the brain can still have normal memory and no perceptible loss of function. So we know that REM sleep's got this really important role in memory, and yet even when it's damaged, things still happen. So, I mean, it also speaks to the just absolute miracle that is our brain. We also know that there's increased metabolic activity in the brain during REM sleep, but we don't know why. Our system is simply being fired to ensure that things are working. Does it prime the brain to more quickly return to consciousness towards morning? Does the chemical shift that occurs specifically with respect to the cessation of the activity of histamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin allow a reset of metabolic pathways? And we're going to talk about the importance of serotonin in a bit. And does that then sensitize the ability of neurotransmitters to do what they're supposed to do? Or is there something more to this mysterious state of consciousness? It's just, to me, so incredibly fascinating. But all that science mumbo jumbo aside, we know that it's really important that we get sleep, because it is the great equalizer. After a good night's sleep, everything seems more doable, more possible, more achievable. We feel better, our thoughts are clearer, our emotions are less fragile, and adequate sleep ensures that we can do a number of things. And number one of which is repair our body. When we're sleeping is when our body produces the extra protein molecules that help to repair the muscle damage or help to build muscle from all that work that we've done at the gym, hopefully. And right now it's super important because it's helping our immune system fight off any compromising elements such as pollution or infectious bacteria or mystery viruses. Who knew? It also keeps your heart healthy. Adequate sleep keeps the inflammation process in check. So it protects our blood vessels, and it maintains healthy blood pressure and helps to regulate our cholesterol. Sleep also reduces our risk of diabetes, again related to that inflammatory process. But when you don't get enough sleep, our body's ability to properly process glucose happens, and so the result being that we have insulin resistance potentially developing, and therefore potentially diabetes. This is so important, and in any of our top fuel courses, we talk about this because adequate sleep controls body weight issues. The hunger hormones and the stress hormones remain in balance when you get enough sleep. When you don't, ghrelin goes up, which is the hormone that makes you hungry all the time, or feel hungry, even though your stomach might not be grumbling. Your body, your brain is telling you that, hey, you need to eat. And your leptin, which is another hunger hormone, it goes down. And the problem with that is it makes you never feel like you're full. It always makes you want to have utensils in your hand and looking for food. And the food that we look for tends to be the stuff that's higher in carbs and fat. Now, you're never going to hear me say anything bad about carbohydrates, but the things that we're looking at when we're in this state of ghrelin up, leptin down is not like a nice big Buddha bowl with complex grains and avocado and bean sprouts and chickpeas. No. We're talking, we want a donut, right? So that's carbs and fat. That's the kind of combination that we're craving. So that's why sleep is so important. It also reduces stress. Sleep can help lower your blood pressure and reduce elevated stress hormones associated with today's hectic, fast-paced lifestyle. So if you had a stressful day, sleep can help to mitigate that. But if you are chronically stressed and have chronically elevated cortisol levels, that's now going to have a negative effect on sleep, and we're going to lose that benefit that sleep gives us to help us kind of deal with that single stressful day. So we need to make sure that we can deal with that stress in a way that it doesn't start to negatively create a stress sleep cycle that we'll get to in a minute. The other thing that sleep does is it helps to organize our brain. The University of Arizona did a study, and what they found was that we have a hippocampus in each hemisphere of our brain, so we've got two, and they act like a filing drawer. It's a temporary storage mishmash of information collected over the day. But there's a limited amount of room, as in everybody's junk drawer, there's a limited amount of room in there. So during sleep, the slow wave sleep that happens allows the movement of all that mishmash of stuff out of that temporary drawer, which is your hippocampus, into your cortex, so that it's now stored in a way that you can retrieve it. So when you wake up, the hippocampus is now empty and it's ready to receive more information. It is during that slow wave sleep that the brain is cleaning itself as well. So it's getting rid of all of the cellular waste, and that helps to protect us against neurodegenerative diseases and helps us with emotional stability and helps us retain in an organized way those new experiences, newly acquired skills, and improves our memory. The other thing that sleep does is it protects our relationships, because when we get enough sleep, we are less snippy, less agitated, and less irritated, and we're going to be more likely to communicate. When we're grumpy and agitated, we're not going to want to communicate, or we're not going to communicate well, and we're going to be really unpleasant to be around, and it's going to make the people who live and work with us more likely to want us to go far, far away. And I'm sure that we can all think of those grumpy people that we don't want to be around, who we just wish would get more sleep. Sometimes it's my husband. So what happens when you don't sleep? Well, we've hit upon a couple of those things already, so I'm not going to belabor the point, but the risks of poor physical and mental health increase gradually over time. The longer you go without regular adequate sleep, the worse things get. Additionally, the short-term consequences of sleep loss are things that affect us every day. Attention deficit, slowed reaction time, reduced alertness, impaired problem solving, and reduced motivation, all of which is going to make us not be as safe on the road, even just getting to and from work or anywhere. And it's not going to make us be as productive or as effective when we are at work. So while one all-nighter or one night shift is not going to suddenly cause you to grow a big tumor, as sleep debt accumulates, immune system challenges do increase. Weight might begin to be an issue, and your mental health is going to be affected by chronic sleeplessness as well. When you consistently don't get enough sleep, you're actually increasing your risk of developing depression and anxiety, as well as just being more susceptible to responding inappropriately to those daily aggravations. So you might be making mountains out of molehills when you don't really need to. It impairs our ability to make good choices and decisions, and it actually also has a direct link in terms of our ability to have good social connections. And that's related again to, if you're a horrible person to be around, nobody's going to want to be around you. You're not going to have those connections. So there's so many things that we need to recognize that sleep impacts. So how do you know if you're suffering from sleep debt? Well, if you can't stay awake during the day, if you're sitting at your computer at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're really hoping that nobody walks by because your eyes are really heavy and you're falling asleep, that's probably a sign that you didn't get enough sleep, either last night or chronically. If you feel like you're not as quick to be able to make decisions or your reaction time seems slower, then maybe again, that's a sign that you haven't been getting enough sleep. If you're not able to pay attention as much, or if you drift off, if you're in a meeting and all of a sudden your head starts bobbing, or the person next to you starts seeing a little trickle of drool come out of the side of your mouth and they have to elbow you to wake up, that might be a sign. So lots of things that we want to remember. One of the things that could impact sleep and might obviously end up having longer term negative effects is if you were dealing with chronic pain, because chronic pain has been shown to, on average, short people 42 or more minutes of sleep every night. And so that's just going to keep growing. So that chronic pain leads to more sleeplessness, leads to more stress, right? And so there's a cycle that happens from there as well. So we really just want to try to eliminate that. So how do you know? The thing with sleep is that people who aren't getting enough still tend to overestimate their proficiency with that insufficient amount of sleep. And that's because too little sleep impairs the brain's fundamental ability to function effectively. In the same way, alcohol makes us think we are dancing and singing like a rock star. So they've done studies where they looked at people who got progressively less and less sleep and were doing a particular task. And while the results of the task were going down, 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 when they asked the participants how well they were doing, the participants all thought they were getting better and better. So it's a real disconnect between how well we think we're doing and how well we're actually doing. One of the the other thing that's really important is that insufficient sleep cannot be overcome by motivation, willpower, caffeine, or other stimulants. You can't drink enough coffee to compensate for the negative effects of that sleeplessness or that sleep loss. One of the really concerning findings that they have shown is that there's a relationship between chronic insomnia, and we're going to talk a little bit more about insomnia, but the link between chronic insomnia and suicidal ideation. And it makes kind of sense because when you're not sleeping well, you're not likely to be social. That can lead to unconscious isolation, and that becomes a risk factor for being able to maintain good mental health and may therefore eventually result in those suicidal thoughts or ideation at the far end of that mental health continuum. So, you think these things aren't connected, but everything is connected. So how do you know that you're sleep deprived? Well, there's this sleep latency test that you can do, and it's an actually official multi-day, multi-nap test done under the supervision of a sleep specialist where they measure the time it takes to fall asleep while lying in a quiet, dark space. The premise behind the test is that the more quickly you fall asleep, the more sleep deprived you are. You probably already know that you are or aren't getting enough sleep, but if you've got some time on your hands, you can do this home version for fun. So what you're going to do is lie in a quiet, darkened room on your back, holding a spoon or a fork or some kind of a metal thing, hanging over the edge of the bed or the sofa. Under where your hand is on the floor, you're going to put a cookie sheet or a metal tray. You're going to set a stopwatch and you're going to try to fall asleep. So in theory, what happens is when you fall asleep, you drop the spoon, it hits the pan, making a horrible noise. You check the stopwatch to see how much time has elapsed. So if you're able to do all those things and you're able to hit the button on the stopwatch, what you'll hopefully see is if it takes 15 minutes or more to fall asleep, then you're actually probably doing okay. If you're falling asleep within 10 minutes, you're not getting enough sleep. And if you're falling asleep and that spoon is hitting that pan in less than 5 minutes, you're probably severely sleep deprived and you need to work on your sleep hygiene. So an interesting thing for you guys to do on the weekend. So we have what we call a sleep bank account. So you can make up missed sleep from one night the next day by sleeping in that hour or however long you underslept. But because sleep is restorative and you need to have that sleep every single day, catching up on missed sleep isn't the same as having gotten that sleep in the first place. In fact, a Japanese study has showed that it takes 4 days to fully recover from a single hour of lost sleep. The chronic loss of sleep that most people experience therefore creates not just a debt, but a deficit which we can never fully repay. And that lost sleep, as we already talked about, costs the body something over the long term. So even if you choose to sleep in on the weekend, the 2 to 4 hours that you might be making up for isn't going to compensate for that 1 to 2 hours a night that you're in debt over the course of the week. So you're technically always behind that 8 ball. Plus, if you have an irregular sleep schedule like that, so certain periods of time that you go to sleep, or like a certain sleep schedule that you follow during the week, and then the weekend is a free-for-all, that irregular sleep cycle can make it more difficult for you to fall asleep come Monday again, and then that sets the cycle going all over. So you really do want to create a sleep schedule or routine that you follow consistently in order to maximize the ability to get that quality sleep over the long term. Because we know that the effects of sleep debt in the short term are that we don't feel at our peak. Too little or broken disrupted sleep for long periods of time can, as we talked about, lead to a serious array of medical condition. But the scary thing is that the damage actually takes place at the cellular or the genetic level. Good genes get sluggish and bad genes multiply faster, and it can affect about 3% of the genes in our body. So while that might not sound like a lot, those bad genes can still result in lowered immunity, protein damage, and metabolism issues, and that can happen after just a single week of sleep deprivation. I know it's so depressing, right? But in addition to those short-term effects of fatigue, brain fog, impaired vision, and irritability, there's those longer-term effects that we talked about: obesity, heart disease because of the inflammation and the cholesterol, diabetes because of insulin resistance, and an actual increased risk of mortality, independent of any of those individual risk factors. Too little sleep can definitely shorten your lifespan. So we want to make sure that what we do is eliminate the sleep debt by getting the sleep that we need. And we're not, unfortunately, going to undo the damage that we did maybe in our university years when we were pulling those all-nighters. That's history. We can't fix that. We need to get good sleep now. So the thing that often happens is people will say, but you know what, you can get good at being sleep deprived. And that's not actually entirely accurate. It's good to experience sleep deprivation during training, for example, so that you know how you operate under those conditions, but it's wrong to assume that you can get good at it. The repetitive training of, for example, a weapons drill is important so that when you're suffering from sleep debt, you can still do it by instinct, but that's different than being good at being in a sleep debt state. So if any of you have watched those old episodes of MASH, where the surgeons were going full tilt around the clock, that's a good example of how adrenaline and training can help you to just carry on and get her done. But you also see the effects that fatigue starts to have because the mistakes increase and good judgment decreases. So you need to find a real balance around how you're going to manage that. And part of the struggle with that is for a lot of people as they find themselves in this stress sleep cycle. So if you've had sleep that's been negatively affected as a result of stress, you're not alone. That happens to a lot of people. Situations in life stress them out. Things that we've been dealing with for the last 10 months has probably affected a lot of people's sleeps. And all that tossing and turning and worrying leads to a terrible next day, and then it happens again and again. And that spiral can easily just basically go down the toilet. So that day-to-day stress of life causes most people to experience the odd sleepless night, but when it becomes chronic, they can't escape it. It's really hard to get out of the whole cycle of stressed out, can't sleep, feel more stressed, can't sleep, so tired, get stressed about not sleeping, feel more stressed, et cetera, et cetera. It's really difficult to break out of that. And so there's a relationship to insomnia and the stress sleep cycle. And so I'm going to just hit upon that a little bit. So if insomnia is the thing that is causing you to not sleep, then that causes you to have a crappy day, and that leads to increased stress, and then that leads to kind of, again, more insomnia. The thing about insomnia is that it's the definition of that is that it's the trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And about 10% of people suffer from some degree of insomnia. But the thing to recognize about that is that insomnia is not a nighttime disorder. It's a 24-hour disorder, because people with insomnia typically also have complaints during the day. It's not that common to have a completely happy, non-anxious insomniac. Most people with insomnia are anxious, stressed, and at some point going to be unhappy. So there's a real link there. So it's been shown through EEGs that people with insomnia are actually getting around 6.5 to 7 hours of sleep. But it's broken up, and those disruptions that occur cause them to experience that as large parts of the night being spent in rumination and ongoing thinking. So there's this perception that they didn't have a good night's sleep, even though it's not the same thing as true sleep deprivation. So the upside is, for those of us who feel like, oh my gosh, I know I have insomnia and I can't sleep and I'm waking up and I just feel so tired. Part of that tiredness is just the self-talk that we're doing, and part of it is just that we feel like we haven't had a solid block of sleep because we haven't, right? It's been disrupted. But it's not the end of the world. We're not going to grow that tumor and die tomorrow. But if you feel that your anxiety as a result of maybe this and other things is getting to the point that it is starting to impact your life while you're awake and while you're asleep, then it's probably a good idea to talk to someone to get to the root of that issue and maybe deal with any underlying causes. And that's usually so very often the case. The insomnia is often a symptom of something else, and then that can spiral because we don't deal with that underlying issue. So we need to really always try to get to the bottom of things instead of just putting band-aids on things, that if we just got to the root cause, we would sort it out. So what we want is to try to find the right amount of stress. Clearly, we can see that our sleep is negatively affected because of too much unresolved stress, but we do need some. We just need it in the right balance. Too much, too long, too often is problematic. Too little, too infrequently can be just as detrimental. What we want is the Goldilocks principle, just the right amount, because that is where we are motivated, challenged, and inspired. It's what the right amount of stress does for us. When people talk about managing their stress, they're not talking about eliminating it, because we can't. Some stress is necessary to motivate us to do anything. The only time maybe you don't want any stress is if you're sitting on the beach, somewhere on vacation, whenever that can happen again. And we know that even there, all good things must come to an end, because sooner or later you're going to be itching for something to do that is a little bit more taxing than swimming up to the bar for another pina colada. But back at home, it's often the opposite problem. There's more things demanding our attention and seemingly not enough hours in the day to get everything done. So what are we going to do? It comes down to recognizing what you have control over, letting the things that you don't have any control over go, and doing what you can with respect to the things that you do have control over. The bottom line is, if you take back some control over the right things, your stress will likely decrease somewhat, making it more possible to start to deal with the things that will help you to get the sleep that you need. Plus, it'll just make your life happier. So you have to prioritize. Figure out what in your life you can literally let go of that will not come with negative short or long-term consequences. For kids or people who have kids, do they need to be in 6 extracurricular activities? Again, when that was a thing. Would one be enough? Do you need to have 2 cars in your family? Would one do? Can you carpool? Can you do the car share program so that you can save money on gas, car payments, insurance? This is just spitballing, right? Like, these are just things that you want to think about when you're starting to figure out a way of trying to find control over things. Because when we try to control things we can't, that's when stress intensifies. We can't control our coworkers, our bosses, our kids, change to the pension system, our children's teachers. Some things need to be accepted. Or you need to find that thing, that specific thing about the issue that you can change. So if stress and change and control are things that you think that might be something that you want to learn a little bit more about, then I would encourage you to take our Stress Take Charge program, which is coming up in February. But at the end of the day, and sometimes, and I know it sounds trite, but sometimes truly the only alternative is to figure out a way to let some of that shit go. Because if you don't, it's going to be really difficult to not only just sleep, but just get through your day. Right? We just need to learn how to let it go. So that's the stress and sleep piece. So now what are we going to do to make it so that we can actually get some of that sleep? Well, we're going to talk about this crazy word, because the bottom line is we need to make sure we're going to get the right amount of quality sleep. And what we need is a system of what's called sleep hygiene. And that's just one of those crazy words that most people are like, what? But that sounds weird. But all it really means is what we do to maximize the likelihood that we're going to get a good night's sleep on a consistent basis. Here again, as with stress, like I just talked about, it's about doing something about the things over which we have control to create an environment that will promote quality sleep. And we're going to look at these 4 areas. environment, schedule, routine, daily habits, and choices. And that's my dog growling. I don't know what she's growling at. So the first thing you need is a dedicated space for sleep. If your home office happens to be in your bedroom, that might be something you want to consider changing. It's better to have it in your living room or some small corner of your kitchen than in your bedroom, because you want your bedroom to be a sanctuary. You don't want it to be an extension of your work life. Your bedroom needs to be ideally around 18 degrees Celsius, dark. You want to have the most comfortable bedding and bed that you can afford. Eliminate as much clutter as you can, and no screens, which means no television. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. If you're a shift worker, you're definitely going to want to invest in blackout blinds, because you need to have darkness for quality sleep, as dark as you can stand it. It's a good idea even, and I've done this, I cover the face of my alarm clock so that the light from the clock isn't sort of staring you right in the face, especially if you're having one of those nights where you just aren't sleeping and then you just, every time you roll over, you look at the clock, it just makes it worse. So cover it up. You still know where the snooze or the off button is, so you're still good. So this is a consideration from a military perspective, like in terms of the safety of your sleep environment is going to be dependent on where you're trying to sleep. When you're at home, obviously that's not likely an issue, but on deployment, for example, that's not always the case. Though there, obviously, it's even more important that you get as much sleep as you can. But because of the dangers that may be present when you do go to sleep, there's a couple of things, and they probably talk to you about this, but you need to make sure that you take appropriate force and individual protection measures. So sleep away from traffic, trucks, tracked vehicles, and protect against those environmental hazards and pests. So check to make sure there's no snakes and spiders and stuff in your sleeping bag area or shoes. And if I ever find myself in one of those situations, I've clearly made some really bad decisions. The next piece is schedule and routine. Just like we know that babies and children benefit from a schedule or bedtime routine, so do adults. Sticking to a set bedtime and wake up time will really, really help ensure more consistent quality sleep, and it helps to reset our circadian rhythm. And again, especially important for those shift workers out there, because your circadian rhythm is going to be just taking a beating. What you want to try to do is get to bed around the same time every night, and try ideally to get up around the same time every morning. And that should be a 7-day-a-week schedule. Although you can have some flexibility on weekends and during vacations, try to only, have a 1 + 1 + 1, 2 maybe hours difference, because again, you don't want to be having to reset every time Monday rolls around or when holidays are over. Really, the routine can be as simple as making sure that you start to wind down a little bit before bed. So shut down the computer an hour or so before bed, watch TV somewhere other than your bedroom, watch the news, or ideally something that's going to be a little bit less dramatic and depressing than the news, like a fun show. Then have a hot shower to get your body temperature to rise from the heat of the shower and then drop as you get out of the shower and towel off, because that rise and then drop stimulates melatonin production. Then you might want to read a little bit, and then it's lights out. So before taxes is not the time to tackle your taxes, hash out the disagreement you've been having with your partner, or start writing PERs. You want to be as relaxed and unstressed as possible. In terms of daily habits, what you've done all day for sure is going to impact your sleep. Have you gotten in your workout? Did you expose yourself to light early in the day? Because we know that that is really helpful with that resetting of the circadian rhythm. Do you have good stress management strategies in place? Do you have a good support network to lean on for advice or to act as a sounding board? What do your meals look like? Are you cooking regularly? Are you cooking healthy foods regularly? Are you still supporting local restaurants by having a weekly takeout option, so that takes the stress off of that meal prep for one night a week? Are you making sure that you're hydrated and not just living on coffee? Can you avoid toxic people as much as you can? Are you setting boundaries as much as possible? And are you creating that sanctuary that you can retreat to at night to help you to get that good night's sleep? All of those things that you can do over the course of the day translate into how much easier and better it's going to be for you to sleep at night. And finally, what are the choices that you're making? Again, thinking of dehydration, that's going to disrupt your sleep because it impacts our heart rate and it can trigger us to wake up. So a really simple fix to that, if you think that you're not drinking adequately over the course of the day, just put a glass of water on your nightstand, because it'll be less stimulating to reach over and just have a sip of that in the night than it is to wake up, your tongue stuck to your roof of your mouth because you're so dehydrated, having to get up, walk to the kitchen and get a glass and fill it. So maybe that's just an easy thing to have on your bedside stand. The other piece to consider is being physically tired is as important as being mentally tired. So it's really important to get enough physical activity. But I'm going to talk about when you're going to do that in a moment. TV is a great way to unwind, but again, somewhere other than the bedroom, and not be the only thing that you do all day. So on your days off, make sure that you're still doing stuff that's getting you active, getting you outside, getting you moving, making you feel fulfilled. Just light activity. We're going to talk about that in our injury reduction briefing as well. A really important consideration is avoiding caffeine after 2 p.m. And you want to avoid alcohol at bedtime, and you want to avoid nicotine all day. There's a smiley face there because it's important. In people with a caffeine sensitivity, any caffeine consumed after 2 p.m. will still be playing havoc with your ability to fall asleep come bedtime. And people will say, oh, but I can have a cup of coffee right before bed and it doesn't affect my sleep. And it might not. You might have gotten to the point that your sleep isn't impacted in terms of your ability to fall asleep. But as we talked about earlier, caffeine affects your REM sleep. So while you might be immune to the effects of caffeine keeping you awake, it's still going to be having an effect on your sleep. And for those of us who are sensitive to caffeine, and I've made this mistake, I've made a tea at 2 or 3 in the afternoon and I pay the price. So I know for myself that I have to make sure that I'm not having that caffeine after 2. Alcohol does the same thing as sleeping pills. It makes you sleepy, but then it messes with your sleep cycle because it's decreasing, again, the quality of your sleep and probably having an impact on some of those other phases of sleep. And the thing about nicotine, and that's why I said you want to avoid it all day, is that it's a stimulant. And night withdrawals will cause smokers to wake up. And if they then wake up and have a cigarette, because it's a stimulant, it's going to make it even harder then to fall asleep, not to mention any of the dangers about smoking in bed and in the dark and all that stuff. So just things to consider. And just as an aside, we have finished a series, and I don't know how many of you are smokers, but I'm just putting it out there. Let your friends know. We've got a 6-part butt out video tutorial. So you just basically watch the video. It's 2 minutes long. It works you through the butt out program, and it will supplement your smoking cessation aids that you get from pharmacy, and will hopefully help you to have a successful quit attempt. So just out there for people to, I'll tell you where that is at the end. Sleep and exercise. Exercise, as you know, is another one of the pillars of health, but when we exercise is going to impact how well we sleep. Caffeine boosts performance, but just like we said, you don't want to have caffeine pre-workout if your gym time is going to be after 1400 hours. Ideally, we shouldn't be exercising within 3 hours of going to bed. The increased stress hormones will get us too jacked up and will also inhibit that melatonin production, so we'll be less likely to feel sleepy and be ready for lights out. But if the only time you have for physical activity is in the evening, then try just doing it as long before sleep as you can. Then you're going to have that hot shower to help your temperature go up and then down, to stimulate that serotonin production, and you're going to make sure that you're hydrating throughout your workout and afterwards to make sure that any effects from sleep or on sleep from being dehydrated is minimized. So that's how you're going to work with your workout schedule. Now, people might be wondering, is there something that I can do with respect to what and when I eat and drink to decrease those things which will negatively affect my sleep or promote better sleep? And the answer is that unfortunately, the relationship between food and sleep seems to be one of the chicken and the egg. Poor diet is linked with insufficient sleep, but insufficient sleep also leads to a diet based on poorer choices. So, the easier way to do that is, if we're trying to sleep better, what we're going to try to do first is choose foods that are going to help us to sleep better. And then as we get more sleep and are feeling better rested, then that's going to help to promote those other good choices. So again, we get like a positive cycle happening. So of course, you're going to want to follow the good old boring Canada's Food Guide as a foundation. And I say that it's boring, but it's also truly foundational. The new version is awesome. I love it. We have a podcast that we've done last December, October, no, when do we do it? Late fall, or no, late summer, early fall. And it's talking about some of the aspects. This podcast season, we've just started recording, and it's going to be on the B side of the food guide, which is all about the stuff that we do, not just in terms of the food. So look for that. The really important research has shown that the foods high in tryptophan, so that's the stuff that makes us sleepy at Thanksgiving and Christmas, could be actually very helpful, because under the right circumstances, in the presence of sunlight and with vitamin D, tryptophan is converted to serotonin. We need to have serotonin to help us to sleep through the night. It's also the thing that we need to keep us in a good state of mind. It's what we need. It's like one of the antidepressant things. It's a helpful, happy neurotransmitter. So we want to have the serotonin during the night to keep us asleep. But when it gets dark, that serotonin, some of it gets converted into melatonin. And we know that melatonin is needed to make us sleepy. So we need to make sure that we have enough serotonin in our system to be able to convert some of it to melatonin to get us to sleep, and then have enough serotonin left over to help to keep us asleep. So in Canada, because of our latitude, we need to take vitamin D supplements between October and May. And actually, the recommendation is to take vitamin D supplements year round, because we know that it has other roles as well to play. So we want to supplement with the vitamin D, and we want to choose foods that are higher in tryptophan. So those are going to be things like milk and yogurt and cheese. And those are all dairy-based ones, not the plant-based ones. Eggs are also a good source. Chicken, turkey, obviously, and fish like tuna. Beans, nuts, seeds, and oats. And by beans, I mean legumes and pulses, so kidney, navy, those kinds of things, as opposed to like green beans and wax beans. And then bananas and edamame, which are young soybeans. Those would all be good choices. So a bedtime snack about an hour before bed would be something like a glass of warm milk, or cold milk and cereal, or a toasted cheese and chicken sandwich, or a bowl of oatmeal, or a half a banana with some peanut butter. Those things would all be helpful to have before bed, because the extra complex carbohydrate will promote adequate levels of serotonin. And if you're choosing a milk protein, you may as well make it casein, so things like cottage cheese, because that's going to be slowly absorbed and utilized all night long to help with muscle building and muscle repair. So you want to try to do that an hour before bed to allow for adequate digestion and to minimize indigestion and heartburn. And you're also going to want to avoid things that are spicy, higher in fat, for those same reasons. You don't want to be kept awake after having this great meal because you have heartburn. You also want to make sure that you're keeping the quantity small, and that this is a snack, and that you've accounted for it, because you don't want this to be extra food than that you need, because you still want it to not be causing you to take in more energy than you're expending. The final consideration around food and drink is herbal teas. And there's been research to show that chamomile, lemon balm, valerian root, or passion flower could all be a calming, soothing part of a bedtime routine, because they have been found to promote drowsiness or actually even improve sleep quality. So there's some things that you can do in the kitchen to help you sleep. So a real concern for us right now is the blue light. Our bodies have historically responded to night and day as a result of the timekeeper in our brain, the hypothalamus. It's what sets our 24-hour clock, our circadian rhythm, and either gets us ready for bed by making us drowsy in response to fading light in the evening, or gets us alert and ready for the day as the light increases in the morning, which is challenging in Edmonton because of our weird long days in the summer and short days in the winter. So we need to have some adjustment to that. And so one of the things we did was, thankfully, we have artificial lighting. But because of that, our body gets these mixed signals. We may start to feel tired, but the brain is responding to the light, so the melatonin and body temperature don't adjust, and we don't feel as sleepy, or we're not as ready, it seems, to want to go to sleep at night. And any kind of light source is going to trigger that hypothalamus. And it doesn't matter whether it's natural light or artificial light, or whether it's light from your ceiling light or light from your screen. And that's why that blue light, screen light aspect is so critical. That is why TVs shouldn't be in the bedroom. I know I've said it several times, but that's why. It's because of that blue light and the light that is being emitted, because our bodies are covered in light sensing, or little light sensors everywhere, head to toe, not just in our eyes. So it's not just going to be going through our eyes to our hypothalamus, it's over our whole skin. So if the TV's on, it's not just your face that's exposed. It's any part of your body that's outside of the covers. And even if your partner is in bed and tucked in, the side of their face that's on top of their pillow is still going to be impacted by that light coming from the TV screen. So their light or their sleep is going to be negatively affected because you're watching television. So get the TV out of the bedroom and then watch TV when you get sleepy, climb into bed. It's off in another room. It's not a distraction. It's not a temptation. And everybody's going to have a better quality sleep. You want to make sure that your other screens are also not in your bedroom. So put your phone on the kitchen table. Don't have it on your bedstand. If you use it as an alarm clock, go to Canadian Tire, spend $10, get an alarm clock, done. Because people will check their phone, and every time your body is stimulated by that light from your screen, whether you're checking for a message or whatever, it's going to cause your brain to be stimulated, decrease melatonin production, keep you from getting sleepy, and in the middle of the sleep, keep you from falling back asleep and staying asleep. So really, you want to try to keep all of the screens out of there. And again, that's why your workspace shouldn't be in your bedroom. You might be tempted to do just a little bit more work, wrap up that one last thing. And while that's really commendable from a dedication perspective, it's not so helpful in the sleep department. The work you bring back to bed with you might haunt you as you sleep. And again, the thoughts that are spinning in your mind might keep you falling asleep. But really, if you have this aha moment and you're like, oh, that's the answer, go sort it out, tap out that email, hit send in another room, climb back into bed, and know that you've got a clear conscience and you can go back to sleep. And now you're not going to affect your sleep or your partner's sleep. So things to consider in terms of screen usage. I'm really, really, really passionate about screens in bedrooms, if you haven't noticed. But you can do another really cool thing the next time you have a space of time away from work. You can reset your sleep, but it takes time. You need to commit to the process though, and trust that the benefits of better sleep will be worth the effort and whatever it is that you might have to give up doing in the evening. And for a lot of people, truly, that's watching television. So if your evening is filled with packing lunches, making lists, finishing work, walking the dog, I don't know, sewing new pants, working on a project, I don't know, if it's things other than TV, then good on you for one thing. But what if those things can be relegated, delegated, or saved for another time? Because sleep is more important than, maybe not lunch, but you know, you got to find that prioritization again. So here's what resetting chronic sleeplessness might look like. You're going to go to bed 15 minutes earlier every couple of nights. So let's say that your target is that you want to get up at 05:45. So in order to get the 7 to 9 hours, you need to go to bed around 9:45, whatever that is in 2100 or 24 clock stuff. That screws me up every time. So, but let's pretend you're right now going to bed closer to 11. So you're going to start to go to bed that first night at 10:45. If you are able to fall asleep right away, then in a couple of nights, you're going to dial that back another 15 minutes till you get to as close to 9:45 as you can. And again, you're still feeling like you can get stuff done. When you've been getting that 7 to 9 hours, and I'm sure it's going to be more like 7 to 8, you might start finding that you're able to wake up without an alarm clock, which is what ultimately you're striving for. And you're going to be doing all of those other things that we talked about: no screens, dark, cool room, stick to the sleep schedule 7 days a week, all of those things. If you're currently only getting 5 to 6 hours and you truly feel like you would sacrifice too much to get to 8, then like I said at the beginning, anything that you can do that'll get you closer to that 7 hours is still going to be a win. It's about that balance. You don't want to sacrifice time with your family or getting things done, but you do still want to do everything you can to get as much sleep that you need, so you're not potentially going to be impacted by those shorter and long-term effects of chronic sleep debt. So other things to try: reading. Reading before bed has been an ages-old way to get ready for sleep. It's better than listening to music or having a cup of tea or going for a walk. And it usually takes around 6 minutes. And it's probably because when you're reading that you're getting immersed in the storyline and forgetting even temporarily about whatever it is that's going on in your world. It causes you to relax. It increases creativity. It reduces risk of dementia and Alzheimer's because it engages the brain. and it requires our imagination to be activated and neural pathways to be stimulated, which television watching doesn't do. So that's a really important and fun way to be able to go to sleep, ironically. Other things to try: progressive muscle relaxation, humming, um, having a pen and paper by your bedside so that if something comes to you in the middle of the night, you jot it down and then it's not rattling around in your head. Guided imagery or visualization can really be helpful to really picture all the details of a place that you find really pleasant and relaxing, and then just allow yourself to mentally go there. Sound meditation, which is kind of like white noise, but with more purpose. So it's like the sound of ocean waves or wind, because that's being categorized by your brain as a non-threat, so it helps you to sleep, or any kind of breathing technique. So the 4x4x4 breath, or any of the ones that you've learned before. Mindfulness, according to the Vietnamese Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Tran, is the energy that helps us recognize the conditions of happiness that are already present in our lives. And so if we can combine all of those things, it will probably help us to get a better sleep. But I realize that I'm running out of time, but I want to talk to you about naps. Quality sleep supports your ability to be disciplined, to think clearly, and to meet all of your responsibilities as a soldier, family member, and friend. If you're not able to get your 7 to 9 hours, then maybe naps might be a way to help you to still benefit from some of that additional sleep, or that sleep that you're losing. It can help to make up for lost sleep, but there's a couple of things you want to keep in mind. Nap length is important. You don't want it to be too long, and you don't want it to be too short. So it needs to be less than about 30 minutes. 25 minutes is kind of 20 to 25 minutes is what you want. You're also going to want to think about timing. If you get up at 6, you're going to want to nap around 1:30. If you get up at 9, you might want to nap at 3 o'clock. It's about a 6-hour difference. And make sure that when you're napping that the conditions are right. It's dark and quiet. And if you're doing it at work, that you've cleared it with your boss. North Bay has sleep pods because of the kind of way that they do work. If we don't have a sleep pod at the office, you might want to make sure that that's okay. Although there's tons of research to show that naps at work actually increase productivity. So just food for thought there for all of the bosses. The thing about naps that's maybe potentially counterproductive is that there's the substance that accumulates in our brains over the course of the day that is what makes us feel sleepy. So if you have a nap in the day, that gets washed away, and then you have to restart accumulating that, which maybe makes it harder to have a nap at night. So that's something to consider in terms of whether you think it's going to be beneficial or not. If it's going to make it harder for you to sleep at night, and therefore it's going to make you need to have more naps the next day, then that might be counterproductive. So maybe you just need to work more on the sleep hygiene piece and leave the naps for people who aren't as negatively affected by that. Then there's this thing called banking sleep. And what that does is you just make a point of trying to sleep for longer periods of time to gain more rest when you know that there's a period of sleep deprivation in the near future. And there's lots of research to show the possible benefits of both banking sleep and shifting the day later. And this is the thing that I think is the most interesting, is that if we start our day later, people will be able to get their best quality sleep in that period of time between 0500 and 0800. And ironically, that's when a lot of us get up and start our days. So if we shift our day later, we actually do better and we sleep better. The Harvard Hospital Study, Stanford Men's Basketball Sleep Extension Study, High School Delayed Start Study, and Harvard Police Study all showed that more sleep and a later start to the day resulted in better sleep, improvement in the number of social, academic, and performance markers that were being measured. The premise behind it, so how do you do it? Go to bed 1 to 2 hours earlier, or an hour earlier that you go to bed, and you get up an hour later for about 7 to 10 days. And then so you're going to do that before you know that there's this, or when you know there's going to be like a period of time that you're going to be getting less than or around 3 to 5 hours of sleep or less in a 24-hour period over the extended period of time. So you're doing an ultra marathon, or you're going into the night shift or something. What they found was in that period of time where you were getting more sleep, as well as in the period of time where you're actually sleep deprived, but because you banked the sleep, they found that the participants noted higher levels of morale, mood, and motivation, better results from workouts because they were shifted to the afternoon to take advantage of the natural circadian rhythms, improved family time in the morning with less stress and better efficiency getting the day started, and they were more productive during the day when they were doing the sleep banking. Then, when they were in the period of sleep deprivation, the participants were better able to learn, understand, and retain new information or skills. They were more engaged and were better able to tackle tasks quickly and efficiently. So really important things to consider if that's something that happens for you on a regular basis. So that's it in a nutshell. Sleep is something that we often take for granted, but we literally can't live without it. So going forward, let's learn from the opportunity that we were given in the last 10 months where we were able to maybe slow down a little, we say, because that certainly didn't happen for us. Maybe do a little bit of reprioritization and reflect on the things that we can do to make our lives a little bit better from a sleeping perspective anyway, as we continue to figure things out and find our new normal, whatever that ends up looking like. If you missed it in terms of our contact information, that's all of our social media stuff. As I mentioned, we have our YouTube channel where we have some Ask the Expert videos. This is where I don't know if our butt-out video tutorials will be on YouTube or if they're just going to be on the CAF Connection, but they're going to be on the CAF Connection. And I will make a thing to put in the chat later, because I'm assuming many of you will be on some of the other briefings. And finally, for those of you who don't know us, this is who we are. Here's your team. Nicole is going to be doing your nutrition briefing, and I'm going to be back this afternoon to do injury reduction. I actually had a ton of polls, but there's so much content that I didn't get to any of them. So there you have it. Too much talking, not enough feedback from you guys. Where am I? You're there, which is amazing. So thank you for that. And Nicole will be ready and waiting for you at, I want to say it's 11, but again, don't have it written down. Yeah, no. Yes, it's 11. And then I'll be back at 1. So for any of you who don't or aren't going to be in the briefings that are coming up, I will make sure that I send that contact information to, holy cow, I'm really struggling. Clearly I didn't get enough sleep over the course of, to Warrant ICOM. I will send all that information to Warrant ICOM, and that way anybody who missed it will have that information as well. So thank you so much for your attention. I hope y'all didn't fall asleep, but that you're going to implement some of those things and have a better sleep starting tonight. So take good care. And for those of you who are going to be back for IRS, I will see you this afternoon. You're welcome, Jocelyn. So if anybody has any questions, that if you haven't already left, feel free to throw those up into the chat in the next sessions. Well, maybe not nutrition because Nicole's not going to know, but throw them up in IRS in the afternoon, or again, send them to Warren ICOM, and then he can forward them on to me and I can respond for you. All right? All right, take it easy. See you guys later. Yeah, sleep banking, awesome, do it.